God did for me what I could not do for myself. And that's just, it's an amazing thing. And I'm sorry for crying, but it's just been such an amazing journey. And so my faith has grown alongside that. But for me, the most important thing is just having had that experience. To me, there's no denying it at that point.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mountain Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. This week's guest was a friend and fan of the show, and I personally built a relationship with her because of it. And she's in the industry. She's a beast in the industry, serves in several capacity. Colbie Campbell, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Let's start with what has become the most existential question that I can ask. Who is Colbie? Isn't it becomes like such a trip up, right? Everybody's like, I don't know. Who's Colbie?
It is. So I am a mother of a 3.5-year-old son named Ben. I am the wife to Chess. I am a construction lawyer. I'm a partner at the firm Slates Harwell here in Dallas. And that's it. That's me.
There you go. Well, I was going to say that's part of what makes the practice of construction law unique is across the table currently an enemy, if you will. Like we were on the other side of stuff. We represented clients against one another and yet friends, right? Like that's part of what makes the practice of construction law like practicing in the 40s because the collective unit of construction lawyers, like all just gets along. We're all friendly, even though like I know you have different clients and I have different clients. We zealously advocate, and they're like, "Oh, cool. How's Ben?"
Yes.
Right. So that makes what you do and what I do very unique compared to other lawyers. So I'll start there. Is just say, yeah, it's cool, right?
Yes, and that is what we've been doing a lot of interviewing lately, and that is the first thing that I always tell people that we're interviewing is how different construction law is for that reason. Yeah. I think it's rare, and I think it's because it is industry focused versus just being a general commercial business litigator. So that's, to me, is I don't think I would still be practicing. I know I wouldn't be practicing law if I was out there doing scorched earth litigation every day and wasn't involved in the construction industry and working with the same people over and over again. Yeah,
it does feel more like counsel to the clients instead of mercenaries for the clients. You're definitely more involved in the business, more trusted advisor to the people that you're representing, the companies you're representing, which it's funny, I never heard you say that, but I've said it a lot. Like I ended up in construction law by accident, but I stayed because of the people.
Yes.
I really, really mean that is like being involved in their business and what's really important. That's what makes what we do special. So
absolutely. It does. I think it is very unique for the legal profession for sure.
Yeah.
I think both of y'all the relationship built with each of you is rooted from this building in some form or fashion, with it being Texo, and relationship and friendship first that turned into business with both of you at some point of my career. But it's a trust level thing. It's like, I know they got my back because they're my friend. So therefore I want to do business with them. And that takes like the transactional feel from it. This is my friend. They got my back. I can trust what they're saying is good, and they're looking out for our best interests, and it's super important. And I think people don't lean into that so often when they think, oh man, it's going to take me away from my family or my occupation to go invest that time to go build those friendships, but it's worth it.
Well, and I think that's one of the unique things that we get in the construction industry. And for me as a construction lawyer is that I have gotten to build those relationships that are friendships. And so I'm getting to check 2 boxes, right? Like when I go out with Melanie and my group of Texo women peers and we go get a massage, that's kind of business, but it's also personal. And I think it's probably rare professionally to have as many friendships as we get to have in this industry.
Yeah.
Well, and there are lots of construction law firms that say they're construction law firms, but what I would say about what Slates Harwell does differently is that you act more like the industry. Right? Like that's the way Kevin does business. That's the way people who are in the construction industry do business is on a relational basis, which is what separates what I would say for me and for you as when you're in private practice. When I was in private practice is like you act more like a construction professional than an attorney.
Absolutely.
which is a huge differentiator for what y'all do.
Yes. And I think, some of I was talking to actually a friend that I graduated from law school with, and he's just does general business litigation. And he was saying, it's been hard to develop business because I don't really know where to go or how to do that. And I thought, man, I've never really reflected on what a blessing it is to be a construction lawyer, because for us, it was go get involved in TEXO, we have industry things that we're involved in more so than we're doing legal networking.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes it more fun for us because you guys are more fun to hang out with anyways.
I was going to say, I haven't been to the other side, but I've been to my fair share of TEXO stuff, and I would assume a little looser of a vibe.
It is.
Yes, it is more loose of a vibe. That is one way to say lawyers are stuffy. Yeah. That's one way.
Less peacocking, too.
Less peacocking for sure among us, yes.
I want a peacock someday, though. That sounds fun. I'm just going to puff my chest out. What do you walk confidently or cocky? Like what?
You tell everybody like how important you are.
Yes.
You talk about all the big things you're working on and all the huge, clients that you have. Like that sort of like self-aggrandizing sort of a deal.
Hi, my name's Kevin. I'm a freaking juggernaut.
Yeah.
You want to know how?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me show you. Look at all the stuff I've done. I want to tell you about all the cool things I've done and all the expertise I have. And
you're very busy. You're very busy all the time.
That is
so busy.
That is the hallmark of a peacock.
Killing it.
Just so busy, man. We can't hire enough people right now. And
I turn around and I win cases. It's just, oh, look, we won.
Yeah, there you go. You're a pro.
All right, I'm in. Let's go.
Let me use the industry friendship. It's unique as a parlay to get to sort of where you're from, right? Because we have a mutual friend in Philip.
Yes.
Who is from Corsicana. You guys grew up together.
We did.
So tell us about growing up in Corsicana and how you know Philip, and kind of draw us forward through that story.
So born and raised in Corsicana, Texas. You can probably hear that in my voice. I've never lost the accent. We were joking. Corsicana is like 6 degrees of separation. I mean, it's a town of 20,000 people, but I feel like almost everyone I meet knows someone from there or has some connection to Corsicana. You guys had Shane Tollison on.
Yeah, that's right.
I went, oh my gosh, Shane Tollison. He's from Corsicana. So, this is y'all getting a whole subset here of Corsicana stories.
It's a niche for us.
Within the podcast, yes. But my mom and dad, but my dad was born in Corsicana. My mom grew up there starting around age 12. So been there a long time. I have one sister who's 3 years older than me. And Corsicana was a really unique place to grow up because it is a small town. And now raising a child in Dallas, I'm seeing even more so a lot of what those distinctions are. But when you grow up in a town of 20,000 people, you know the majority of them. I mean, there's one high school, there's one middle school. So it's just a different way of growing up, and certainly very idyllic now looking back on it, being out in the country and just being around people who know you. And it was a great place to grow up.
Now, how old's Ben? 3?
He's 3.5. Mm-hmm.
So do you ever think, I want to go back? Like I would, there is a yearning to go raise Ben there. Not that you're going to act upon it. Does it ever cross your mind?
It has certainly crossed my mind at various times, because especially now in the age of remote working, you think I could do that more easily than, I could, just given what we do. It's a big city profession.
Yeah.
But it has certainly crossed my mind, and we get down there a lot. I try to get Ben down there a lot because I think it does feel strange to be raising a child in Dallas, in the sense of he's not getting to experience what the country is like and just some of those things. So I try to get him down there pretty often. And then my family has a lake house on Lake Athens, and it's great, kind of same vibe as Corsicana. So we go there probably just as often as we go to Corsicana. And your blood pressure drops when you get out of the city. At least mine does, for sure.
So growing up people grow up in a small town in a couple different ways. One of them, like living in the town, right? Like or some people live outside the town. Like I grew up on a farm, and like, what's your story there?
So we always were in town. My dad so here's my tie to my profession. My dad is a custom home builder.
Okay.
He has had his own construction company since I was born. So mainly custom homes. He does a little bit of commercial, but really mainly custom homes. So I grew up going to job sites with him. I mean, he lived and breathed it. He is the old school kind of general contractor.
No contracts.
No contracts.
Handshakes. He told me he was going to do it.
Yeah, handshake deals. It doesn't generally. He's in the stages of retirement now, but didn't take my advice even after I started practicing construction law. But the old school industry guy, and so we grew up always in town, but in multiple different houses because we were constantly, he was constantly building a house and we were moving around.
So that's interesting. Do you look back on those times and think, oh, I learned X from that, or that helps as you draw forward to your profession? Does that experience help, or does it just give context, or what do you think about that?
I think it definitely exposed me to the industry, right? And I worked there. I worked at my dad's construction company because they made me have a job.
And you knew a guy, right?
And I knew a guy. If he was on this podcast, he would tell you the story of when I slept under the desk one day. He found me sleeping under the desk one day.
I'm assuming this is like at 11:30, not overnight.
Yes, this was like in the middle of the day, but that's what you get when you hire, 15-year-old labor. But
a little dig back.
Yeah.
Zing, Dad.
But I think it really did piqued my interest. And then, when I had the opportunity to explore construction law as a profession, that certainly was a direct tie to that, because my dad's work was always a very big part of his life. So it was always a very big part of our lives. When we're out, we're driving by whatever the site is, we were on site, so I got to see a lot of that growing up.
Gotcha. What about your mom?
My mom raised us. She's got a very cool, unique story in that she was an orphan. So she came to Corsicana at, I think, age 12 or 13 because there was an orphanage there, the IOOF. So, we don't have those anymore. It sounds so old to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But both of her parents were alcoholics, and so she left and was raised as an orphan, and so that's how she ended up in Corsicana, and she and my dad met in high school. So high school sweethearts. Man,
that's a story I would have never guessed, right? Because I think of, and maybe this is me being ignorant, but I don't think of America as like having orphanages. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's me being completely ignorant.
Or at least in big city.
Yeah, and maybe that's it. I mean, you definitely think of, people who are separated from or don't have parents being placed with families and things like this through this foster system, but never like that.
Yeah, this was all probably pre-Child Protective Services. So pre-CPS, pre-foster care. I mean, I don't even know that those kinds of things would have been in place at that time in the 60s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah. So she from Texas and you, I guess, moved to Corsicana then?
Yes, from a small town outside of Waco. Okay. So still in that general area.
Gotcha. Okay, so she grows up then in the orphanage, goes to high school. Like that's her growing up story is that?
Yes.
Wow.
So just an amazing amount of perseverance and tenacity relative to talking about overcoming circumstances that most of us could not even imagine. So both of my parents have a very strong work ethic, which translates, I got it.
Yeah, for sure.
And you sprinkle the tenacity and perseverance on top of that work ethic for the blend of your parents to make you, those are good character traits.
Lots of times when people go through stories like that, and thinking back to your mom still, like they won't talk about it. And they just trap that and say, that's what I did that, period. Now I'm doing this. Like, would she talk about it growing up, or was it just something that y'all knew but never explored?
I'd say the latter, knew but never explored. And that's understandable, I think, to some extent, right? Yeah. But I actually interviewed her for, I think it was like a junior college speech class. And I need to do it again, not interview her, but just sit down and hear more of those stories, because you realize you haven't heard the whole story. Yeah. And I think we process those different from our parents in adulthood too than we ever would have in childhood. So it's something I would like to do with both my parents at some point.
And I think that's really wise, because I've had that experience with my grandparents passing and just being like, oh man, like nobody knows. Mm-hmm. So I've asked my dad to like sit down and like, hey, tell me, him and his brother, sit down and tell me. I've actually offered to like the studios, like, y'all come to Dallas. I want to hear everything. I think about that a lot, just getting those stories reduced. And even over Easter, we were with Ashley's parents, and we were sitting at the table eating lunch, I guess. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. And her dad said something, and Mary, her mom, was like, I've never heard that before. Like, they've been married forever, and there's these stories that exist in there that we don't know, and they're important. They help shape who your mom and your dad are, and they help then shape who you are. So I think knowing them has a ton of value.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it's hard to like focus on the time to pull it out or spending the effort to do it or whatever.
Yes, just in asking the questions.
Yeah, for sure.
It gives you a deeper appreciation of how good you had it versus how not so good they did just one generation before you, you know?
Absolutely. And it's, I think a really cool, my dad was, first person, I think, in his family to go to college. And my sister and I are definitely next generation. We're the first to ever have graduate degrees. So it is neat to see how quickly that can progress, with just changed circumstances. But they both came from very, very humble backgrounds and are self-made people, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Kev. No.
What I learned from small towns, because my wife, she's from Magnolia, Arkansas, is like, it's a good chill vibe, but then like everybody knows everything about everyone. They do. Like even 20,000 is still a lot of people, but Tim, Bill, Samantha, like, and where they were the day before, the week before, what they're up to. And the first time I went to, and I don't know if Corsicana has a town square, but my wife's town square in Magnolia, I sat in the first conversation. I was like, this is overwhelming. Like I'm getting a report on the entire town and what everybody's doing. Do you have like a similar vibe to that in Corsicana? Or
absolutely. Yes. There's definitely some everybody knows everybody kind of things. There are, and I think this is probably true of any place, but there's a lot of, the facade of wanting to keep up a certain image or wanting to, because everybody does know everyone. But I think that quite frankly, that's universal. Probably you can certainly find that in Dallas, right? So I don't know that that's a small town thing, but it's also a cool thing because there's this network of people who know you and care about you. And, if you're sick, there's going to be people showing up at your house, whether you want them to or not.
Yeah.
And that's just a unique thing. And then it translates. You mentioned Philip. My mom and Philip's mom are best friends. So
I didn't know that.
I've known Philip my whole life.
Yeah.
And the fact that we both ended up as construction lawyers in Dallas, it's like, what are the odds of that? But Philip's first job in construction was working for my dad.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And so he didn't get scared off, which is kind of surprising because my dad is like, not the easiest guy to work for.
So you couldn't sell him on the importance of law, but Philip could?
Yeah.
What's the deal there?
Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know that. I know you've known Philip for a long time, but I know like for that long of a time.
Yes.
That's fun.
Whole life. Yeah.
That's fun. So one of the things we talk a lot about on the podcast for listeners are like, oh gosh, here we go, is like the value of mentorship. So as you think about like that period of time, maybe before you left home or whatever, are there folks in your life that you think, man, that person tipped the ball, or I had a teacher that did X, or maybe it was mom and dad, like you've already said a few things like learning from them, but like reflecting on that, 0 to 18 sort of phase of your life. Anybody in there that jumps out?
So I think mom and dad probably are the easiest answer there because they really did so much and wanted to make sure that my sister and I had all the opportunities that they had never gotten to have. So they were just very instrumental in encouraging and supporting along the way. And I had a high school English professor, or I guess not a professor, teacher.
No, probably just a teacher, yeah.
And she was kind of, because, again, we just had one high school, and so it kind of was what it was. But she really, I would say, fostered my love of reading and then just my intellectual curiosity in a way that I hadn't experienced prior to that. And I think that was probably opened my eyes up to the fact that there's a little bit something bigger than Corsicana out there, because you do, when you grow up in a small town, especially at that time, we were just dialing up our internet in the late 90s. So we were really a small world. You really didn't have much outside of your hometown. And so I think that was she was very instrumental in kind of broadening my worldview.
Yeah, I've said it a million times. I'm from Beaumont, and it's not the same, but it's similar. And I felt like my worldview was very tiny until I found a way out. Not that I was just trying to escape Beaumont, but like once I went to college in the big city, all of a sudden I was like, oh man, there are more than the 14 people who are living in my neighborhood, like that sort of thing.
Yes.
You start to think bigger than what's just right there in front of you. So I can appreciate that as being like a moment of like kind of opening and widening your perspective for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're on a streak of this. Last week, today's daily motivation. Have you had a chance to go back and talk to her about that teacher of like, man, looking back, you were instrumental in increasing my intellectual capacity that opened up the curiosity to go explore other things?
I have not, but I know where to find her, and I should definitely do that.
I love that, the whole looking back thing.
I do too. Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
she doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
She probably doesn't know, and that'll make her year potentially.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
My mom was a teacher for 30-something years, 35 years, so like that. Every once in a while, she'll get a message from somebody. It just makes the whole day. It was amazing. Just like, hey, I remember, she taught fourth grade. She was like, I remember you had me in the fourth grade, and I love that year. It was so great. Anyway, I would encourage you to do that. That's the long way to say what I was just saying.
She's like, cool, I'm leaving with a to-do list.
Yeah, thanks. This is a real pain in the booty.
No, it is. And it's so, I was reflecting on that when I was, I saw that question on here, and maybe not so much in that 0 to 18 period, but just along the way, how many people have changed the trajectory of my career just by putting in a good word or opening a door for me. And, those are people by which you have maybe overall, some of them are very big, advocates or mentors in my life, but some people literally just kind of pass through and help me in one way or another along the way. And I need to go back and thank all those people because it's like, if you sat down and charted my whole history of kind of where I went and what I did, it wouldn't be where it was if it wasn't for those people helping along the way.
Yeah. There's another thinking, not for you necessarily, but for everybody, another thinking point about now you're in a spot where you get to be that person.
Absolutely.
You get to be the person who tips the ball or changes it or puts a good word in or whatever. He just spends an extra 5 minutes over coffee to dispense some good advice or whatever the case may be. So,
well, and one of the most fascinating things about that is when people have come back to me and said, you did XYZ and it was just so helpful or instrumental to, me doing this. It's usually something. It's not even the big thing you think you're doing, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to go forth and help this person. It's like the thing you just did and maybe didn't even think about it. Or, that's what's so cool when service work starts getting ingrained in you because you don't know where all those, helps are going to end up. But usually the biggest ones are not even the ones you're planning or you're trying to make happen.
Your standard reps of a given day.
Yes. And
just
that's
like
really
that
cool.
teacher. That's so cool.
Yep.
Okay, so take us to Lubbock. That's where Course of Canada, Lubbock.
Yes. So I
the big city, I guess.
the big city. I graduated high school actually when I was 16. My birthday is August 30th, so I was always the baby in my class anyways. And then I graduated high school in 3 years instead of 4. And so I went to in hindsight.
It sounds like you're really busy.
Yeah, I was so busy. I was the busy peacock.
Taking summer economics, so you don't all that sort of thing. How'd you manage this?
Honestly, it was not hard. It was pretty easy.
Okay.
There were a lot of people who graduated in 3 years, so it wasn't like I had pretty much hit all my core classes and everything I needed to take. So I decided to go to Texas Tech at age 16 and turned 17 soon thereafter. So I actually graduated from undergrad when I was 20. So was pretty young. In hindsight, was too young, but it was still a fun place to go to college. And part of the reason I was drawn to Lubbock was because of the small town.
Yeah.
Austin, places like that just seemed overwhelming to me. I remember going to visit UT and being like, no way. And that was before Austin was what Austin is now.
Yeah.
And so Lubbock was a good size for me. Lubbock was a good, small town with everything you needed in it. And it was a great place to go to school.
And so you did undergrad and you get your JD from at Tech too?
I did. I took a year off in between undergrad and law school because I did not want to turn 21 while I was in law school. This is how I've made a lot of decisions in my life based on like very poor reasoning that ultimately worked out okay. So I'm glad for them. But I thought, I've done this. I'm only 20. I really want to have a year off before I'd start law school because I'd heard how hard it was and all of that. So I ended up working for a state representative, the state representative from Corsicana, and down in Austin. So I worked I think it was the 79th legislative session, and it was fun. It was the Capitol is a young person's place for sure, but it was so fascinating to see how the laws get made or not made, and it was just a great job to have in that year. And an attorney who I met who was a lobbyist is actually the one that ended up making the introduction to me at the firm I ended up going to work for. So that's one of those kind of, you never know who you're going to meet or how, what's going to springboard where. So that was a great year, and then went back to Lubbock and did 3 more years of law school.
Let's pause on that year that session at the Capitol, because I think that's one of the things that people are shocked most about when we would take, and I haven't gone in a couple of years, but we would take the YCC trip down to Austin. Everybody's like, wait, this is being run by 20-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, we met all the U's, I think, instead of the actual representatives.
Right, yeah, you stop, and you're like, hey, I have some paperwork, and you leave, and you're like, that person was 21.
Yes.
Yeah, they run the Capitol, for sure. I mean, there are definitely elder statesmen, and the representatives oftentimes are older, or not older folks, but like older than 20 folks. But man, that place is run by Colbies.
It is a young person's game, and as it should be, because you're up till 2:00 in the morning. Those committee meetings go late into the night often when people are testifying on bills and things like that. And you can do that when you're 21. I couldn't. If you told me now I had to stay up until 4 a.m, it would be highly problematic.
My eyes just got heavy hearing that.
Have you guys seen it went viral, the video from the Judiciary Committee in the last couple of weeks where they were giving testimony?
I have not.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
The leech thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will not describe it here, but I will send you the link. But I will say in short, there's some sort of new House rule where the way you sign up to give testimony at a committee hearing changed. And people started Bart Simpsoning the names on the list.
I did hear about this.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think I've given the listener enough to Google it and go find it. I will not specifically reference it here, but it is amazing to say the least. But anyway, that was a little side note. What I wanted to ask was, like, for people who give a pitch for getting involved, like, how does something, about that time you were there, like, seems like our listeners could benefit from trying to become engaged in the process or whatever. So give a pitch here for being involved in the political process based on your experience.
I think that people probably underestimate the amount that representatives and senators and the people in our government are listening, and that, your voice can have an impact. Those days that, with YCC or whatever organization you're with, when you are walking around and handing out the flyers and thinking, well, was anybody really listening to that? It's important. It's part of the process, and that feedback, at least in my experience, back in 2004 and 2005, that was being digested as things went through the process.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of, they call it watching the sausage get made, and that's accurate, in the sense of some of it, it's a very interesting process, but I think it's important to be involved. And I do think that, the leaders of our government, for the most part, are listening.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
What would make the sniff test, if you're the gatekeeper to your representative, that okay, I'll share this one, versus no, they're reading from a index card. They don't care about this.
Well,
it's a legit question.
Even the index card readers, I have no idea. I'm sure it's more sophisticated now, but we would tally, so if you were calling and,
oh, interesting.
20 or 4 and 10 are against, we would just usually keep a tally. There were people who came in with personal stories, who had a personal tie. I remember, I don't even recall exactly what it was, but something to do with stem cell research was a hot, more of a social issue that year. And I remember someone who came in who had a personal tie to needing to receive stem cell research or, stem cell therapy for an illness. And that makes an impact, right? A personal story is always going to make an impact, in my opinion, versus reading from the note card. But even reading from the note card is better than not reading from the note card, right?
Oh, yeah.
At least
I was
showed
note
up.
card guy.
Yeah, well, at least you showed up. Yeah, right.
I had no idea what I was doing. That's an intimidating place.
It is.
If you're not about the political life and you don't know much about it, you're like, what am I doing here?
Well, and you're like, yeah, I'm here to read a note card about a comptroller rule regarding how taxes are like. I got no idea.
Yes.
I don't know. But to the point, like at least you showed up, and maybe you got a tally mark, and the needle starts to get moved slowly but surely. The sausage getting made is an interesting process.
It is.
Why did you pick that though? So in that year gap, what did you pick it? Because I feel like y'all do a good job of from an attorney standpoint. If you're building your resume, did you think like this would be good for the JD or post JD, or like I just want to hang out and party in Austin, or like what was the motive?
So it's interesting. My parents moved not too long ago, and they found some note card that I had filled out before graduation, and I guess it was to go on a board for some award or something. And it said, what are you going to do? And my note card said, I'm going to go to Texas Tech. I'm going to major in communication studies, and I'm going to be a lawyer. And like she handed me that note card, and I go, oh my gosh, like I never, most people deviate at some point, but if I make a plan, I just kind of stick to it, I guess. And almost to a little bit, I get very entrenched. I don't like change, but I did not have a plan to go work at the Capitol. I just knew I wanted to take a year off, and in college had become interested in politics from a communications standpoint. And so I kind of fell into it. Like I said, a lot of my big decisions in life, they worked out, but I fell into it. He needed someone to come and work, and, I was available and wanted to do it, but I learned a lot. And I actually thought when I went to law school, I had loved it so much, and I loved Austin so much. I thought I was going to go back and work, at the Capitol after that. And I did end up, again, my decision-making process. One of the reasons that I ended up clerking, the year after I graduated from law school for a Supreme Court justice was because I wanted to go back to Austin. I mean, that was my logic, right?
So
I should apply for these clerkships so I can go live in Austin one more year, because I knew at that point that I was headed back to Dallas. I already had my offer at the firm, so I knew I was already headed to Dallas, but I was able to defer for a year and go back to Austin. So it definitely, that 1 year certainly had a big impact on life, but I did not ultimately return to work at the Capitol.
So you made a comment about that note card. That sounds like that note card where you charted course was from high school. Mm-hmm. So was that when you figured out, hey, I'm going to go be a lawyer? Because I didn't figure it out then. I went to do something different.
I guess so. Per the note card, yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I mean, I worked briefly at a law school. A law firm in high school. I guess after my dad fired me from Brazel
Sleeping
Construction.
Under the desk. Oh, sorry.
So yes, but I think I always knew I loved reading and writing, and this is such a lawyer cliche, and was horrible at math.
Yeah.
And so law school just made sense to me. And in my mind, I had decided, I know I want to get a graduate degree. I had thought when I was at the Capitol and was loving it so much, I had actually looked into, do I want to stay in Austin and maybe get a master's in public policy or something like that?
Yeah.
And then I read the course requirements and saw the word statistics and thought, no, I'll just stay in this law school thing. And so that was really it. I have no lawyers in my family. I had no frame of reference for even what being a lawyer was. I think I just knew I wanted to pursue a postgraduate degree because I felt like it would be important for finding a job and financial security. But I don't think that I really thought I was going to use my law degree.
Interesting.
And lawyer as much, all I've done is lawyer.
Yeah, spoiler alert. You're using it a lot. Okay, so I don't want to yada over those 3 years for law school unless we need to take a stop down there for something, but I'm just going to go right over to clerking at the Supreme Court. I'll interlude. So you spent 3 years, got your law degree, and went to the Supreme Court. Anything interesting there? I know that is a political body of sorts, and handling those cases is interesting, and being in that, I don't know what the right word is, environment at the court is unique. So, anything to share around that? Yes.
So I think I had imposter syndrome the whole year that I was there because, I thought, I had clerked a summer at the Solicitor General's office and had met a young attorney there who was so great at mentoring the summer clerks and just, getting to know them and really taking the time to outreach. And he had clerked for Justice Willett, who I went to work for. So again, that's another one of those moments. He's now a federal district judge as well. But it's one of those moments of you meet someone and they make an introduction or they do something that, that's very likely was a large part of how I got the job. And it was fascinating. The Supreme Court, at least at the time, was rare in that you could it's one of the few state Supreme Courts where we get to sit in when the judges are deliberating about a decision. So you are sitting in the room with the justices and getting to hear their thoughts on how they think a case should go, it was really interesting. Clearly learned a lot research writing wise. It was just a great experience overall, and I'm glad I did it. The salary was much different than the salary at the law firm, but I'm glad I took the year and made the decision to do that because it was a great year.
Man, talk about how the sausage gets made. That's a different flavor of sausage, but that is in the middle of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And the court is trying to interpret what the legislature did. And you're going, well, they were just over there making their own sausage. And yes, the whole process is very interesting. So I've worked, I guess, in multiple branches of government.
Hey, that's cool. Well, I'm going to props the idea of being there because you sort of yada over getting to the Supreme Court. Like you don't do that just because somebody said your name out loud in a room. You do it because you excelled in law school, you had great grades, your resume was excellent, you had the requisite experience. Maybe that guy helped tilt the ball, but that's not a job that everybody gets. That's an awesome job.
Well, thank you very much.
And it springboards you then, although you may have already had the firm offer, they deferred it. It sounded like it because of that job.
Yes.
Which is also a unique opportunity. That doesn't happen usually. So that's kudos on kudos to having accomplished those things. I don't want that to go unrecognized as we yada over that story. So,
well, thank you very much. Yes, I had the job at Gardier because I had been a summer associate and they allowed me to defer to go work at the Supreme Court for a year. And the most interesting thing that happened was I started at the Supreme Court in 2008. So we all know what started happening in 2008 and 2009. And by the time, so it was supposed to just be that I was deferring for that year and then I should have started at my law firm, Gardier, in 2009. But because the economy had tanked so badly at that time, they actually deferred us, as most law firms did, most big law firms did. So the solution was they paid us to not come to work yet. And what's so funny is at the time, I remember being just devastated, right? Oh my gosh, all I want to do is, go work and start my career. And now I think, wait, I was getting paid to not work. Yeah. Is anyone offering that job now? Because, I'll submit my resume. So it was a very interesting time to start to start professionally, and not just in the legal profession, but the legal profession definitely was doing a lot of interesting things. And then it was kind of a double whammy for me because I ultimately ended up starting November, I think, of 2009, because we had a big construction case that they needed help on. So they called me in a little bit early and let me start.
Hey, remember how we were paying you to not work?
Yes.
Psych.
Hey, is there any room on that bench? This kind of stinks.
Yeah.
6 months in.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd actually moved home and was living. My dad had a rent house because they were paying me, but they weren't paying me enough to like live comfortably in Dallas. So I had a brief stint back in Corsicana, then came here and started in November of 2009. And so it was a very interesting time in the sense that things were hard at law firms, and then the construction industry had been hit so hard that it was just a very interesting time to start practicing construction law.
But interesting as in good for y'all? Because I would imagine cases spiked.
Well, I'll let you answer that.
It was depressing.
Yeah, I bet.
Some litigation spiked, but people were also just walking away from, people were wholesale abandoning projects. They didn't want to spend, the legal spend to fight about things. So we were slow at that time. And I don't really have a good picture of what it would have been like before because I started in it. But we were slow enough that in our section, we had a construction section that I actually ended up doing quite a bit of work, because one of the things as an associate at a big firm is you've got to bill 2,000 hours. And so the hours have to come from somewhere. You got to find them. So I did a lot of work for other partners outside of the construction section. I did a lot of general commercial litigation, a lot of business divorces.
Which are terrible.
They're so terrible. And I did a lot of insurance coverage, and I did enough outside to know that was not what I wanted to do. But at the time, I didn't know that. At the time, I just thought this is what practicing law is like. But they're miserable. It's much more scorched earth. Everybody's angry all the time. It's just it's a totally different vibe. And so I'm grateful now, with the benefit of hindsight, to have started in that down market, because it gave me the opportunity to explore enough other things to not have any questions that I ended up in the right place. And I think it also gave me a lot of gratitude that, my salary got cut, I think 3 different times before I even started working, because they were just like, oh, just kidding. Now you're not starting until this date and your salary's this. And so they were doing a lot of things, just to try to respond to the economy. But I'm glad that I had those experiences, because when things did pick back up, it made me able to, I was so grateful for that. So that was, to me, I'm glad I had that. Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to rewind that story just a little bit. And you said they called because they had a big case. And I don't know who they is in that story. Like, I know that Gardner had a construction group. I think I know who was there, but who was the they calling at that time to say, hey, we got a big case. Remember how we were paying you to not work? Now we're going to pay you to work. Come help us. Who's the they there?
So the they was John Slates is the one who called me, and Greg Harwell. Steve Henry was the head of, or Slates was actually the head of the construction group. Steve Henry, who's now Austin's Industries chief legal officer, was also over there with us. Yeah. And then we had some other partners as well, but the they in that story was Slates.
I figured. I was trying to hone in on that, because that story becomes relevant. Who the they was then becomes relevant in just a moment or two. But those names of the people who were at Gardner at the time, who the they were, those are the usual suspects in construction law, right? Among many others, but like people listening who are attuned to that are like, oh yeah, I know all those guys.
Yes. And Gardner had a very substantial construction practice group for a very long time. And, one of the fewer bigger firms that had such a large construction practice, I would say, which was kind of unique. Had I not been at Gardner, I would have probably never ended up as a construction lawyer, because most big firms don't have the same kind of construction practice that that Gardier did at that time.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the market in terms of boutique firms and large firms flex in and out of wanting a construction group or not a construction group. And it's not that we're unique in that sense, but we're unique in the way it fits in or buckles into a large, global full service style firms. It's just been a fun journey to see people like try to get in our market or not, or do we want to grab a group or not, or does it fit? And I know rate pressure is a big issue and all this stuff too. So I don't know what the point I was trying to make there, other than not a lot of large firms like Gardier had a construction group. I guess that's really what made me think about that. So that was unique at the time.
Yes, it definitely was. And you mentioned rates. So that was a big, I'm assuming this is coming up. That was a big reason why we ultimately made the shift to a different platform, because it was getting harder and harder for us to be competitive with boutique construction law firms, because we were charging the big firm rates.
Right. Yeah. So then you start to catch that rate pressure at Gardier, and then I don't know the story, and I definitely don't want to like pick at a scab or whatever. I don't know what lies in there, so I'm not going to pick at it, but a constituency of construction lawyers at Gardier decide to leave at some point, and you, along with that group, decide to go with them. Am I putting us in the right box?
Yes.
Okay.
And no scabs to be picked. It was really a rate driven thing. I mean, I think they were trying to bill me out like, it's like they were billing out me as a second year associate who knew nothing and was practically worthless at like what Canterbury was billing out. I mean,
Right.
it was just so mismatched. And we were getting a lot of pressure too, because the market was still bad at that time. And so long-term clients were saying, what can you do to help us out? We want to keep giving you business. And so, and I, of course, was an associate at the time, so I wasn't privy to all of those conversations, but I knew they were happening because they were happening next door to my office. So I heard them.
You heard them muffled through the window, the gap between the wall and the window.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was the summer of 2013, and it was John and Slates and Greg Harwell were the two partners, and they decided to leave and start their own firm. And then they asked me and Matt Waterman and Giselle Gafford to come along for the adventure. So we were the 5 who left Gardier, and we're pretty much the only 5 remaining in the construction law section. Different people had gone to do different things. Brett Lamb, for example, was at Gardier. Brett Lamb was one of my early mentors at Construction Discovery Experts, and he's now with Lauren Abeda.
I know him.
There you go.
So it's a total, it's kind of six degrees of Gardier and 6 degrees of Corsicana, I guess, because there's a lot of us who have ended up in different places, but are all kind of still connected together.
Sure.
So Brett's another fun one that's he's come full circle.
Yeah.
With that.
Sorry, I made an awkward connection pause there because I thought you were taking a breath, Kevin. Sorry. Okay. So that's a journey, right? Like you're like, hey, I'll take this journey with you guys. Mm-hmm. Off we go. Mm-hmm. And I will open the floor. Like, where's that journey take you?
So we left in June of 2013. Yep. June. I want to say our first day was like July 5th, maybe. That we opened the firm. So we're about to have our 10-year anniversary, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me that I've now been practicing at Slates Harwell much longer than I've, worked at any other job. Yeah. So we opened our doors. It was all of the things that you can imagine starting a firm is, especially when it's a bunch of lawyers trying to start a business. But we did it. And, I think one of the interesting things is all 5 of us are still working there now. Giselle left and then came back recently. So it's neat that the 5 of us who started that journey 10 years later are still on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to a variety of things. Yes. We could enumerate them all, but listeners are like, oh yeah, that is an amazing story, because lawyers are notoriously fight with one another in those scenarios where there's like grappling for ground and how does the comp all work and all the different mismatches that lawyers are notoriously awful at.
Yes.
A decade later,
we're all still here.
All still there, which is a testament to a lot of stuff.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
But a month into that journey, things kind of took a turn, right? Was it a month into you starting there?
It was a month in. So we're transitioning to the personal storytelling side of things, right?
Yeah.
So about a month into, let me back up, I guess, and try to tell the story in somewhat of a linear fashion. So I'm an alcoholic. My recovery sobriety date is September 30th of 2013. And for that, I'm very grateful to God. And I mentioned early on, I have alcoholism in my family, and had now, and have in the benefit of hindsight, know that from the first time that I took a drink, I drank alcoholically. Of course, I did not know that then at the time, but one of the best definitions of alcoholism that I've heard is when you want to stop drinking entirely, you can't, or when you start drinking, you can't control the amount that you take. And I fall into the latter category of that. Once I start, I don't have a governor is the best way that I can describe it. And I don't have any control over the amount that I drink. And that was true of my drinking career starting at age 14 on. The thing that changed for me over time was, I'm very type A, I'm very perfectionistic, and I had all these goals, right? I wanted to do all of these things. I wanted to achieve and succeed. And so that whole elusive control allowed me to think that I was controlling my drinking for that period of time. And to me, an alcoholic was someone who was under a bridge, who was homeless, who, was drinking out of a paper sack. And I wasn't any of those things, right? I had a job at a big law firm up until a month prior. I had a car. I had a house. I had literally set out to achieve. I had literally achieved everything I had set out to achieve. I mean, there was not, a check mark that I had not, a box I had not checked that I had been trying to. But despite the fact I had checked every box, I was totally spiritually dead inside. That is the best way to describe it. I was spiritually dead, and alcoholism is a spiritual sickness. And so I think moving from the big firm to the small firm platform was so significant in that story, because when you're at a big law firm or a big company for that matter, it's a lot easier to hide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People aren't noticing your comings and goings, especially the culture around a big law firm. There's just a lot of partying. There's a lot, that's just lawyering in general. There's a lot of drinking. There's, a lot of things seem to kind of center around alcohol. And so it's really easy to justify that and normalize that. And so, as we move to the small firm platform, it's a lot harder to hide.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coming in hungover, like, oh, hey, there's you
are.
There's only 5 of us here. There's only 5 of us here.
Yeah.
And, but in my mind, I wasn't drinking it. For some reason, it's funny. We set these, well, I don't do this, so I must not be an alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't drink at work. I don't drink during the day. I still have my job, still have have all these things, right? Things, literally things. And so anyways, it did not take long for that facade to kind of crumble when we changed platforms. And there were many other things happening too. It wasn't just a change in work, but I made the decision on September 30th. So we were maybe 2 months in to check myself into inpatient treatment. And I did not give Slates and Harwell any heads up notice. I had my boyfriend at the time call them and tell them after I was already on my way there. But as I was on my way there, it wasn't, oh, I'm an alcoholic, I need to go, address this. It was, I just need to fix these underlying things and then I can drink normally. Like I literally said that on my drive out there. It was like, oh, if I just fix this, then everything will be okay. And I was really not going for any of the right reasons. But ultimately, God got me there, and that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
And it did not take me but 2 days of being there to be sitting and reading the big books. The big book is what we call it. And I read the doctor's opinion in the big book, which defines alcoholism. And I just went, in my mind, I don't think this really happened, but maybe it did. I mean, in my mind, the clouds literally parted. I was sitting in this gazebo and like the sun was shining down. And I just had this overwhelming sense. I had a spiritual experience. I had an overwhelming sense of calm and peace in knowing I'm an alcoholic and that's okay. You know, and it was a relief. It was a relief to know that, because it was like, okay, this is what it is. This is what has been plaguing me for so long. So now let's start the work.
Yeah.
And man, a lot of work it has been since then. Recovery is not, yes, there are 12 steps, but you're working them for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I've heard that from a variety of people. Like that is not something that defines your past. It defines always, and you're always like working it and wrestling it and knowing it's there and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So I can definitely appreciate the idea that like the culture of a law firm or the culture of the practice of law like precipitates some of that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't need to go too far to find a bar full of lawyers drinking. That is just, it is normalized. In fact, before we started recording, we were talking about the construction law conference.
Mm-hmm.
That is, it is beyond normalized there, right? Like
yes.
that is just, and so like how much of it do you think that brought you to that point is derivative of the profession that you chose? And how much of it do you think is just derivative of genetics or prior behavior or anything else? Like what do you think about that at this juncture?
I think that the disease of alcoholism is, you know, at its core, a disease. And I think genetics plays a lot into that in relative to, like I said, in hindsight, the first time I drank alcoholically. So I think for me, and that's not everyone's story. Some people say, I drank normally for 20 years and then one day everything changed. You know, for me, that was not the case. Profession definitely plays into it because it is such a high stress profession. Mm-hmm. I will say what I did not have, and what I was using alcohol to fill was everything. But I didn't have any tools. I didn't have any tools to manage stress. I didn't have any tools to, deal with conflict. I didn't know how to deal with conflict. I didn't, at the time I was not acting as a good person. I was dishonest. I was very self-seeking, self-serving. I mean, all the things. And so, but I think that I increasingly, as the stress of my profession increased, my use of alcohol definitely increased. And so I do think it ties into it in that way. But, I once had a hat, a Homer Simpson baseball hat that said, and I thought it was so funny, and it is still actually funny to me because I do love The Simpsons, but it said, alcohol, the cause of and the solution to all of life's problems. And that really, to me, I'm like, that sums it up.
Good job. Yeah, good job, Homer.
Thank you, Homer. Because I drank when I was happy. I drank when I was sad. I mean, and what I didn't realize was in that process, what I was doing was really deadening everything and deadening my ability to feel anything, right? And also just further complicating all the things that I already didn't have tools, the right tools to help manage professionally. So I will say that, profession ties into it, but I don't think that's all of it.
It doesn't matter if you became a softball player, volleyball player, president, it would have found you.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
Coming with you for the ride. Yeah. Can't run from it. It's faster.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, let me back up to set this up better. Everybody has those stresses, right? And I will empathize or maybe even sympathize with the idea that like lawyering is real hard. Mm-hmm. Like you were putting other people's burdens first. You were oftentimes putting yourself second, perhaps by code of ethics. We can discuss that. But and there's a lot of other people who go first. And sometimes that weighs heavily heavily in different ways through different seasons. And it's really hard to manage. And one of the things you said that was interesting that I want to kind of go back to is like, you didn't have the tools at the time to manage that. what tools now do you have, or what have you found that helps manage that? Because a lot of this podcast is me asking questions I want to know the answer to, but there are lots of, because I want to know but there are lots of people out there who have had the story or having the thought or the experiences that you just described, and you may have like a key right here to say, like, this is what I learned to accidentally tip the trajectory of somebody. What are they? What are your tools?
So I will say the two base tools that for me are so intertwined that I've stopped even trying to separate them are my recovery program in the 12 steps and my faith. And those things go absolutely hand in hand. I really started in recovery and it grew my faith just exponentially. But I did in early recovery, someone told me, get a sponsor. I got a sponsor and they said, do what the sponsor tells you to do. And I am nothing but not a good rule follower. So, I did what I was, they said, show up to a meeting. I showed up to a meeting. And I won't go deep into the steps, but there is a lot of hard work in working those steps. There are the ideas of admitting to God and yourself, and to another human being, what all, you've done. There's the concepts of going forth and making amends.
Yeah.
And there's the concept of, doing so in a way in which you're only addressing your behavior. You're not addressing the behavior of the other person. There are so many things tied up in working on resentments and humility. And I mean, it's just, I could literally take up hours talking about the tools that have come from not just being in the program, but working the program. And then that's translated directly over to my faith. I didn't end up in recovery because I ended up in recovery. God has done all the hard work. I've just shown up.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that journey then, because sometimes people's story of or to faith, let me say that differently. Sometimes God shows up for the first time in the gazebo, air quotes right there. And sometimes he's been hanging out like in your mind or along the journey. And then you just have like an epiphany to like return to. It's lots of different incantations there. What's that journey look like? I mean, is that the first time in the gazebo that he shows up, or tell me a story?
Yes. So, and I will say this, like my husband, for example, he's just always been a believer. And I think that's so amazing. Like, people who have just always been believers. And he's so solid in that regard. And that's not my story. I was raised in church. My parents, we went every Sunday. I did all the things, all the youth group things. What I never understood in all of my early faith journey was I had somewhere along the way picked up in my mind, and it's probably because perfectionism is one of my worst character defects. I developed this concept that I can't be in a relationship with God until I'm perfect. Like I have to be perfect. I did go to Catholic school for a time, so that maybe there was some of that in there too, but of just, I have to do everything right. And then I can talk to God. And, a lot of people who are in recovery will say, I just felt like God abandoned me. I never felt like God abandoned me. I felt like I could not have a relationship with God because I was so, just buried in shame and guilt. And I knew I was doing the wrong things over and over again, and I was stuck in that cycle of waking up and regret. And, what do you do to not regret it? You want to forget it. And it's just, it's a cyclical thing. And so I do think that moment in the gazebo was my spiritual awakening moment. I will not say at that moment I thought, okay, now I get it. Now I truly understand what it means, to experience grace and salvation. Now I can say I can. And I feel, I get choked up every time I talk about it because I feel so grateful. Like I have experienced what it's like to just have grace just poured over me, that I did not deserve. And it's amazing. And I was, God did for me what I could not do for myself. And that's just, it's an amazing thing. And I'm sorry for crying, but it's just been such an amazing journey. And so my faith has grown alongside that. But for me, the most important thing is just having had that experience. To me, there's no denying it at that point, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think oftentimes the people, or let me say that differently, like your husband, who's just always been a believer.
Yes.
Like that feels different than people who have had like a challenge or a valley or a moment or an awakening or whatever word you want to package that up. Like those two experiences feel different.
Yes.
But that doesn't make anyone bigger or better or different than the other, because at the end of the day, it's the same God, it's the same grace, it's the same redemption story. It's all the same. It just shows up differently in different lives, in different times, at different points. So anyway, I just drawing that juxtaposition, because sometimes I feel like, I kind of have I've been a believer since 4th grade. I don't have that like hitting the wall story. And sometimes I don't wish for it, but I definitely have like a reverence for the idea that it happened, right? Like when I hear that story, I'm like, man, there it is. Like that God showed up right there.
Yes.
Like that's amazing.
Yes.
So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that other than to say that's awesome. When you look back at those moments and you use the word shame, of shame or regret or frustration or imperfection or whatever, like, can you identify those moments now as just being like the enemy on the attack?
Absolutely. And I think that is where the enemy wants you to stay when you're living in any kind of addiction, right? I mean, that's exactly like you were the perfect candidate at that point. And so I absolutely think that breaking those bonds is one of the biggest gifts that I've received, both spiritually and, in recovery, because he's got you right where he wants you.
Yeah.
For sure.
That mountain of shame is like Everest. And
It is.
Like the taller it gets, the more you want to retreat away and not work on faith, because shame's in the way. It's number one.
And it just, the more I have shared my story, I mean, it's amazing. And, in the sense of how much sharing is a shame reduction tool.
Yeah.
It just is. And that's why I mentioned earlier, that you go through that process when you're in recovery, because, and it's the idea of confession as well, right? Just that you were sharing those things because otherwise it's all in you, right? Yeah. And you've got to get it out. Mm-hmm. And, you've got to, and that's true if you're in recovery or not, find someone that you trust, find someone, who is a good sounding board for you. It doesn't even have to be somebody you know that well, and share with them. And that's instrumental in reducing that shame mountain.
Yep. Yeah. And as that decreases, that the healthy degree of vulnerability increases. And so when that darkness comes and rises behind you, if you're getting more comfortable being vulnerable, chances are you won't look back or run back. Yes. I've noticed in my past, like that big bad wolf, I wouldn't share that he's coming because I want him to devour me again. Mm-hmm. I want to go back.
Absolutely.
Let's take another lap, buddy.
Yep. Absolutely. And that made me just have a thought. Oh, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, if y'all have ever done any Enneagram work. And so I've also got the voice in that, kind of the negative self-talk. It runs really, that tape runs in my head a lot. And so you mix that in with, addressing things like shame, and you have to be very cognizant of that, because it can get you, it can come running for you quick otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say thanks for sharing that story, because, well, first of all, I didn't know it. So it's so much of what we do on the podcast. I hear stories for the first time. I'm like, man, I never knew that. And so thanks for sharing it. And second, like, thanks for everybody else for sharing it on their behalf, because the power of you telling that story, I promise, hit a listener's ear where they're like, man, me too. And it like, I have heard, and I know Kev has too, heard dozens and dozens and dozens of stories of impact of people sitting in that chair, sharing their stories, and the beginning to change the trajectory of people's lives. And that is as much as you wish perhaps you didn't have that story. Now you have it as a tool to help impact others. And that's what you're doing right here. So thanks for doing that.
Well, thank you. And that's early in recovery, I would hear people introduce themselves as, my name is so-and-so, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. And I would think, how can you be grateful? And I can sit here today and say with 100% absolute truth that I'm grateful to be an alcoholic. I would not have the life I have today. I would not have the relationship with God I have today. I would not have anything that I have today if it was not for the journey I've had in recovery. So it is not a part of my story that I regret, other than the parts that I regret hurting other people.
Yeah. Well, so how long, going back to like the Slates Harwell piece, you leave, how long was that season, and what did that, like, facing that fear going back to them look like?
So I was in inpatient for 30 days, and within being there for a couple weeks, I had convinced them that I had to have email time, even though you have no phone. They take away your phone and your email. But I'm like, I'm a busy, important lawyer. As a 4th-year associate, I got to have some email time, which is silly looking back on it now. But
they gave it to you?
They gave it to me, and I would go in there and like check my emails, which I was not busy nor important, so
like,
nobody.
Hey, discovery is due. Someone else is.
You're hitting your own hornet's nest just to cause traffic.
Exactly. But I did have an email from Slates, and he had asked to come out and see me, and I thought, oh, this is it. Like, I'm going to get fired. Slates had been my boss at my old job, but we had not really worked together that much.
Interesting.
And so I really didn't know what to expect. And he came out to the treatment center, and he gave me a big hug, and he said, my dad is in very long-term recovery, and we're here to support you. And we will we will make it through this. And so that is another moment, just talking generally about, I met Slate's dad once briefly, but I never met him. I never knew him. And he dramatically changed the course of my career because he was in recovery and he was in long-term recovery, and his son got to see that, and his son knew how to react to having an employee in recovery. Right. And that's one of the coolest things to me about recovery is it's so much bigger than just any kind of direct impact. It's like just living out your story can sometimes help others. And that was the case for me. And the firm gave me a lot of latitude in those first couple of years I prioritized meetings. I was in intensive outpatient. So I was going for 3 hours a night to intensive outpatient, and was really just putting it first. I had been told and was following, the advice that if you don't put God and recovery first, anything else that you put in front of it, you'll lose. And that terrified me. And I had already lost a lot. And so in terms of, relationships and spiritually and things like that. And so I did that, and I had the unique experience of getting to kind of utilize what I was learning in recovery, those tools I was learning, to translate them into the practice of law. And dealing with difficult opposing counsel, receiving the emails at 11 o'clock at night that you just want to immediately respond to. I learned to practice the pause. I learned that in recovery. I mean, so it really, professionally, it was like I grew, I was growing that simultaneously. And I remember having, when I had my gazebo moment and I knew, I can never drink again, I remember thinking, what am I going to do on New Year's? And how am I ever going to develop business?
Yeah.
Because no one will want to hire me.
This is 10 years ago.
Yes.
It's way more adopted today than 10 years ago.
Yeah. And, but as far as I know, I've never lost or not had a client, because of being in recovery or not drinking. And so, but those are the things I was wrestling with, to your point, Kevin, of just in early recovery and professionally, how do I how do these two things go together? And my guys at work were very protective of me and, made sure that, I remember very well going to my first construction law conference sober. I was scared. I was scared to go there. And you know what? It was totally fine.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is really paying attention to you. People are paying a lot less attention to you than you think they are.
Well, you learn mechanisms, like get a Sprite with a lime.
Yeah. Yeah. But, even
nobody's
then,
asking questions. No.
People are not, people notice me a lot less than I think I'm being noticed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We talked about the conference. It is everything we already said it was, but
yes.
Those are real concerns, right? Like, not that they're legitimate, but I can perceive them like jotting through your head and thinking, oh God, how am I, like, if this is the space I play in, how do I effectively play in that space now?
Yes.
And having to wrestle through that. One of my life's dumbest ideas is that I'm going to write a book that parallels a marriage to basketball. I think I could do it. But one of perhaps my greatest ideas is you should write a book on how the big book, as you call it, parallels or taught you great lawyering stories or lessons. Because man, whatever you learned, like the pause, great idea. Say that all the time. Like, there's stuff that you've taught yourself or learned or translated or whatever that would go for miles and miles and miles worth of value to teaching lawyers how to do whatever you've learned to do. Like, anyway, you should write that book. That's your idea, free of charge. You should write that book. It's going to be a good one.
So I need to go back to my teacher and tell her thank you, and I need to write a book.
Yeah,
basically.
Small stuff.
Yeah,
just little stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, so far. Just little stuff so far.
Got it.
I just love that in startup mode, when things are pretty stressful and fear of the unknown in a business, they chose love and care.
They did.
Over, like the company and performance. It was like, no, we're going to wrap our arms around her collectively, and we got her back.
They did.
Kudos to all of them.
Yes, big kudos to all of them, and for what we do in the construction industry and the legal spaces, it's a big part of our life. I mean, we're there longer hours than we're at home, and so to have people in that space who were supportive was amazing. I don't think I would still be practicing law if I hadn't had that support, because it was a rocky first couple of years.
Yeah, but you said earlier, it's pretty rare air for the original five to still be together.
Yes.
10 years later. There's a cultural element to this journey that you bring all of them together through that darkness in Deep Valley.
Well, and they've gotten to live all of it. They've all seen me cry. I'll say that.
Yeah. When I was in the private practice of law, there was one other law firm that whenever I was interfacing with a potential client or something like that, and they said, "Well, here's who we use," I would say, "Yeah, that's a great law firm. Y'all should use them." And that was Slates Harwell. Anybody else, I would try to maybe you should, but I always had high reverence for what you guys were doing because of what you were doing, how you were doing it, the people you were doing it with, etc. So having said that, tell us more about the firm. What is it that makes you guys unique?
So I think that one of the things that makes us unique is that we have tried our best to operate a little bit outside of the traditional law firm model, which we're still we're all in the traditional law firm model. Unfortunately, we all live and die by the billable hour. But one of the things that we did pretty early on, was we all sat down together, the whole firm, and came up with what our core values were going to be. And, they're on the wall of our break room now, and everybody voted on them. Everybody put input into them. It wasn't Slates and Harwell saying, here are your core values, go forth and core value. It was all of us collectively saying, what does this firm mean to us? And, how can we make it better? And culture is one of our core values, and being intentional, and caring about each other. And we really do care about each other. My best friend in the practice of law is Linda, who is the paralegal that came with us from Gardier. And, we've worked together my entire career. So we really have longevity, and we have relationships that are just so far outside of the bounds of professional life. And that's awesome. And we've added really great people along the way. Like Aaron came and joined us recently. I mean, we've tried to be intentional about the people that are coming to work with us, because it is a small firm and it does matter. And we want everyone to be aligned with the things we care about.
Yeah, I can recall sitting in these like small study rooms at Baylor for on-campus interviews back in 2000, whatever, and firms coming in and talking about culture. And at the time, in my infantile idiocy, just being like, "Oh, okay, like that doesn't." And have learned over the course of the last almost 20 years, that's almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like it, not to be cliche, and you could probably tell me who says this, but I can't remember. Actually, Daniel's going to say it's so and so. But culture eats your strategy for breakfast, and the ability to be yoked together, chasing the same thing, like really means everything. And you guys have done a great job building and cultivating that. So kudos to putting those words on the wall and staying true to them.
Well, thank you. And I think for what we do, and in order to deliver the best service that we can to our clients, there's such a big element of trust and knowing, yes, I'll step up and help you here. And I mean, when you're a small firm, especially, everybody's doing everything all the time. And, at the end of the day, the people in the construction industry and the legal industry, the people are what make the business. And so that's where you need to put your time and your efforts. And we work so much that, you might as well work with people you love.
One of the days y'all don't work, though, is Fair Day.
State Fair, Slates Harwell State Fair Day.
Oh man, y'all blow up social media on Fair Day with your corny dogs and a big text picture. It looks awesome. I'm sure it's a grand old time.
Every year, yes. We have lots of GoPro footage of every year when like whoever's joined that year, like the new person gets well, okay, so at the State Fair, the big rides that are like in the back.
Yeah.
The ball that like comes down and it slingshots you up into the air and rotates around. So we make every person who's like new, who's joined the firm in the prior year, ride that ride as like their initiation.
And you pay the extra for the video?
And we pay the extra for the GoPro video. Just in case, they say they're going to leave one day. We're like, you can, but
Remember when you puked on that stranger?
I love a good hazing story because that's really what that is.
It's a good hazing.
We used to make people sing at the Christmas party. If you're new, it's like, and you got to sing a Christmas song, go. So similar, and I get a lot of love for that.
Yes. We also, at our Christmas party, we do a different game every year, and we did lip sync battle for multiple years, which is very fun. But, some people, we only make the attorneys do it. And some attorneys are like, I don't want to. And we're like, oh, you've got to.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, look over here on the wall. It says culture.
It says culture. This is part of it. Get up there and lip sync.
And like it and do a good job because we're judging you.
Is one of your core values no movie quotes? Because John Slates knows all the movie quotes. We were at the Texo retreat, and I learned two things. That you became equity partner maybe that day. I got the tip off because he knew we were buddies.
Yes.
And then he knows all movie quotes.
He does. And I know none. So that's definitely not on the wall. Yeah, none of them, not all of them land,
More than two fistfuls of times I've been in a conversation with John where he'll like put a movie quote at me and I'm just like,
I got nothing for you.
I got nothing for you, man.
Dude, he's got them for days. Man.
Yeah, and I'm just like,
he peppered like 20 into one dinner. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I didn't watch all those. I don't know. I'm sure that's real funny. But I don't know.
Such a good dude, though. It's been cool to get to know him in the last several months.
Yes, yeah.
He's on the board now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's do well, I don't know. Go do anything we want. Involvement talk, where you're making a funny motion with your finger.
Yeah, that final dance.
The staying alive.
We actually didn't talk about all the things she's doing.
I know. That's what I was going to say. You want to do that? Then we talk about stuff you're involved in. We talked about, I know you're involved with Texo. I know you're involved with the construction division at the ABA. I don't know. Hit us with all the many things you're up to these days, professionally or personally, whatever.
So I am on the board of the Construction Education Foundation, which has been cool. I've been doing that in the last year. I am.
Is Fultz still involved with that?
He is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Shout out to the Bish.
Yes. And I had not met him, but have stalked his wife for a long time on social media because if I wasn't a construction lawyer, I'd be an interior decorator.
Got it.
So I was like, felt very I think I was probably more excited when he called me about that versus the appointment to the board. And, I told him, I said, I know your wife, right?
Yeah.
I've still never met her in person, but, she's a great designer.
Shout out Sarah.
Yes. Yeah. Shout out to Sarah. So doing that, I am just rolling off. I just finished my last year with the State Bar of Texas Construction Council. That's been great. We plan all the content for the annual construction law conference and
thankless. That job, thankless.
It is pretty you hear,
nobody says it's great. They only say, "Oh, okay, we're doing insurance again. Great."
And the Wi-Fi didn't work yet.
Yeah,
It didn't. It was real bad this year.
Yeah, I would like to lodge a complaint regarding
really
the Wi-Fi. It's terrible. Anyway.
And I just got selected to be an ABA diversity fellow for the ABA Construction Forum. So that's a 3-year fellowship. So I'll start that. Actually, I leave tomorrow for Vancouver. Will be my first time attending a meeting with that.
I don't know exactly what Kristen Sherwin does with the ABA, but I know she's super involved.
She's super involved. And
does that overlap with what she does? I have no idea.
It does, yes. And Kathy Altman is also super involved, and both of them are friends. We've got a great group one of the cool things about being a construction lawyer is you make friends with people outside your firm. And I'd say that with the women in construction law do a very good job of supporting one another. And we kind of have a network, even though we are all adversaries, competitors, whatever you want to say. They've been the biggest source of mentorship for me, probably, or outside of my own firm, because there's not a female above me at Slates Harwell.
Yeah.
And they have also been a huge referral source. I mean, it's just been this great network. And I don't think outside of the construction law industry, you would experience that. So the ABA has been great. And it's just been a really cool organization. And then pro bono, I got a really cool opportunity to start doing pro bono work for a recovery center, Nexus Recovery Center. They're building a new medical facility. So
Awesome,
it's like the first time I've ever, one of the things, I think the first time you and I went to lunch and I told you way too much about myself, Kevin, for a first meeting. One of the things I had struggled with a lot in my career was I love helping people. How do I help people, and how do I align my recovery life with, my work life? And so that has been a really unique opportunity to get to help in that area of helping them with construction contracts and things like that as they navigate that process. And so that's another just a big source of joy for me when I'm able to use my skill set in a capacity to help out nonprofits.
Yeah, for sure.
Isn't that what that 5K was for? That name sounds familiar.
Yes. So I'm also involved in attorney serving the community, although really not super involved, but I got more involved this year because they pick a different organization every year, and 100% of what they collect goes straight as a pass through to a nonprofit, and they selected Nexus as their nonprofit this year.
Awesome.
So thank you for coming to run. Kevin also medaled.
I'm sure
in the 5K, and another girlfriend I invited medaled. So I was like, next year I'm inviting people that have lower bars because I'm over here walking.
No, keep bringing the ringers. It ups your cred. You're like, no, I'm not super fast, but I know people who are.
Yes,
helps your street cred.
I know who I'm putting on my team if I ever have to assemble a team.
Colby, I'm not there for the charity. I'm a broken man. I'm trying to win.
He's a masochist at heart. He's trying to win. He's trying to be miserable at the end and then jump in an ice bath or something. Like you laugh like a crazy person just then.
I'm a psycho.
You are a psycho. All right, so let's pivot to husband shout out. I don't know how his story fit into that story. We didn't weave that in. So husband shout out and shout out to Ben, a little story about there, and then we'll head to the end here.
Yes. So Chess and I met in, I'm going to have to get this right, 2016. We met in the summer of 2016. We were engaged in January of 2017 and married in May of 2017. Boom.
You know what you know, and
exactly. When you're getting married in your mid 30s, it's certainly you do. You know a lot more then. And Ben came in 2019, July of 2019. And he's 3.5 now. One of the cool things, and I think one of the things that really brought Chess and I together when we met. He's a landscape architect. And so he's in the industry, over there with the architects and the engineers, but he's in the industry, and he and I kind of speak the same language. And so we're interested in what each other does. We don't, try to talk about it ad nauseum, but we do talk about our work and share our work. And there's a lot of overlap there. He left, he had been at a lot of the different large landscape architecture firms, and he left this summer and started his own firm with a female partner, which is awesome. And so it's been really fun to get to be involved in that endeavor, from an entrepreneurial aspect as well. And that's fun. And we both work from home quite a bit. And so it's fun to office together. We actually work well together in the same room. Most people go, you can work with your husband in the same room? I'm like, yeah.
Why are you shaking your head back and forth, Kevin?
Because I would nag Sadie so much that she would have to find another office.
Like just always throwing paper clips at her and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like a juvenile.
Yeah, just like random screams as loud as I can.
Right. She gets on a big call, and then you're like, yeah, I can imagine this.
Yeah, this actually just happened.
Give him a hard plug here. What's the name of his company? What's your area of specialty?
His company name is Land Print, like blueprint, but land. And they do all things commercial landscape architecture wise. They do a lot in the master plan community space. So, amenity centers, things like that. And then they also do just pretty much anything commercial. Gotcha. They do. So, and it's fun. He's very artistic. He can draw. I'm like, Ben, go draw with your dad. Like he's over there drawing something elaborate, and I'm like doing the stick figure. So it's fun. It's really neat to be industry kind of aligned in that regard. And we worked together all during COVID. So it did give me a different appreciation for the architect's role in projects that I got to kind of see firsthand and on lots of Zoom calls and things like that.
Now you hate them less than you did previously.
You start defending them.
I'm like, those contractors are like, that was a pretty stupid question, That's
funny. That's funny. Okay, so let me give us a moment to look back at the last hour or so to ask two questions. Did we miss anything? Because I know we told, as we have a penchant for doing in and out and around and back and forth, right? So did we miss anything that you think, man, I really want to talk about that, but we didn't get to it? And the second thought is, do we miss a shout out in there somewhere? You'd be like, you know what, I really want to say thanks to so and so, or call out somebody for having accidentally tipped the ball or unknowingly tipped the ball, or whatever the case may be. Just before we sort of move on, look back at the last hour or so and clean up some stuff if we missed it.
I don't think so. Is there anything that you guys think?
No. I'm just always fearful. And Kevin and I get feedback sometimes where like we'll wrap it up and end, and then tomorrow somebody will text me and be like, man, I meant to say whatever and I just missed that. So I've tried to start at the end before we move on. Be like, do we miss something and you just gone along with it because we just talk too much, or that sort of thing. So
you'll think of 10 things on the car ride home.
I was fixing to say it's pretty much like leaving the courthouse after like doing oral argument on a hearing. Like, then you just spend the next 3 days beating yourself up about all of these great points that you could have made. And why did I not say that when the judge asked me that question? And so I'm sure this is the same experience.
Right. Section 1A was really the right argument, and I just didn't even think about it.
I could have freaking spiked the microphone after saying this.
Spiked the mic.
See ya.
I don't think that happens much down at the courthouse.
No. I can imagine it, though.
Yeah. Less, but sure.
My crazy brain. Let me imagine it. Football spiking microphones as a lawyer.
Okay. Okay. We'll do our little two-step out here then. We usually talk about books and then kind of a one big thing. So any books you've read ever or recently, or that you would commend to the reading of our listeners?
This is hard to narrow down. I was an English major in addition to being a communication studies major. So I love to read fiction mainly, but in terms of nonfiction,
I'll take a fiction book if you got a good one too. Whatever.
Well, I thought about this a lot because I thought, oh gosh, I've got to come with a book, one or two from nonfiction purposes. I would say the big book in terms of just completely changing my life. That book completely changed my life. So that's an easy one.
At the risk of asking a dumb question, is that like actually the name of it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought that was like a colloquial way everyone referred to it.
Actually, I just said that with such confidence,
That's
and
okay.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I bought it. It's fine.
Blue. It's a blue big book.
Okay.
Usually.
Yeah. We'll find it. If you're interested in finding it, you're going to be able to Google it.
You can find it,
Yeah.
yes. And then the other one, nonfiction, Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown.
Okay.
That in terms of, I mentioned, perfectionism is one of I used to think it was a character strength. I've come to find it's one of my biggest character defects. And how directly perfectionism is tied to shame and the way that you can work on shame reduction through, some of that is all rolled into that book. So that's a book I read early in recovery that I think just really talking about tools was a good tool for me and kind of set my thinking in a totally different path than what it had been before.
Yeah. We should have talked about it. We'll do it offline, but that idea that you just said regarding perfectionism, man, I've wrestled with that probably for the last 5 years. Like I used to think, no, that it is a skill. It is a pro. No, it's an excuse and it's a con.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I've been there.
I mean, it serves you well, right? Like lots of things can serve you well, but it's a double-edged sword if nothing else, for sure.
For sure. You're going to give me a nonfiction book? You got a good one?
I've got so many good ones that I don't think I could narrow it down.
That's cool. That's fine. I can't even tell you the last time I read a nonfiction or a fiction book, rather. Just not in my wheelhouse. I read The Godfather once.
I read fiction books every night to Quinn.
Well, touche. Yeah. Those are good ones, I guess.
Couldn't name any of them.
No.
Goodnight Moon. That one needs to be
burned. Yeah.
Goodnight Nothing is one of the pages. Come on.
We have that in like 3 different forms. We have like big hardback, small, yes, it's like we can't get rid of it, but I am.
We can't get rid of it. It grows.
Yeah, it's like comes back,
It's like a lizard's
like a
tail. We tear it off and it comes back.
Like in the horror movie when you think you've gotten rid of like the object and then you come back and it's sitting on the bed or wherever. But
somebody's cringing over the idea that we just compared Goodnight Moon to a horror movie, A Lizard's Tale, and suggested it be burned.
Come on, Goodnight Mush. What is that?
Kevin's been on a long tirade against that book for years.
I'm going to tear it in half when she opens it. Sorry. All
right, hit us with the one big thing. This is how we end. You've had a lifetime of journeys. Tell us what the one big thing is for listeners who are trying to find a nugget or pull something out here. What you got?
So my one big thing is stolen from recovery, as most of my good thoughts are, and it's to do the next right thing. It's the idea of doing the next right thing. I think goals and big picture goals and ideas are wonderful, and we should all have them. But for me, especially with dealing with perfectionism tendencies, sometimes the best thing to do is literally to just do the next right thing. And when I was early in recovery, I was so overwhelmed with just life and doing anything that I literally had that on Post-it notes. I had it on my coffee maker and I would go make my coffee and I would say, okay, what is the next right thing to do? And sometimes the next right thing is just go get in the shower. When I'm overwhelmed at work and there are 50,000 things to be doing and I have to start prioritizing and I'm stuck in that place of, I don't want to do this because I'm worried I'm not going to do it 100% totally right. Just do the next right thing. And so that has served me really well in just going forward. And sometimes when I felt career-wise or personally wise, just stuck, or that what the message God is giving me is to wait. Just because you're in that season of waiting, you can still do the next right thing, right? And it's easy for, I think, my brain to conceptualize it on such a small scale versus eating the elephant of whatever the big idea or the big goal is. So I think that's my encouragement for the day is if you're in a place with something big or something small, and just do the next right thing. What is the next right and good thing to do? And it'll probably all turn out okay.
Yeah. Given your story, I'm going to ask you here, if you're comfortable, to like, what's your contact info? If somebody's like, man, I really want to talk to Colbie. I have a similar story. I need somebody to talk to, and you're the person. How do I get in touch with you?
So I'm pretty Googleable. You can find me on the Slates Harwell website, and that's got my email and phone number information. I can also give my cell phone number should anyone want it.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
It's 214-763-3797. And one of the biggest pillars of being in recovery and working the program is being of service to others. We can't keep it unless we give it away. And so that's what I'm here for. And so I love hearing from people. There's really nothing better than to get a phone call. And that's been one of the most rewarding things about being vocal, about being in recovery, is to get that phone call from someone who goes, I know I don't know you well, but you're the only person I know.
Yeah.
And where do I start, or where do I go to get help for, someone who is trying to start? And that is one of the most rewarding things. And that is, absolutely God's hand at work in that process.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your story and your time. Congratulations on almost a decade
Thank
of
you.
recovery. And I really appreciate you just putting it out there for us. It definitely is going to help somebody somewhere. So thanks for doing that.
Thanks, guys.